attention. The propaganda's win, stress feeding on my tension. My countrymen, they love their fiction. Words are now displayed with good intentions.
Welcome to 1 of 200, the Media and Politics podcast, or is it the Politics and Media podcast? Who can tell these days? The two have become so enmeshed. I'm joined by my co-host, co-founder, and what else? Philip, how you doing?
Kia ora, ni hao. Welcome back to 1 of 200. I'm doing good. Beautiful day in Tamaki
Yeah.
Makaurau. Can't complain.
It's scorcher, as they say. Also joined by special guests, Jen, how you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. Also a beautiful day in Ototahi.
Wow, just all around the country. And Angela, welcome back.
Kia ora.
Is it a beautiful day wherever you are?
Oh, yeah, no, it is a beautiful day here in Polyneke. We've almost had shit, actually. It's kind of scary. I think we're going on 8 straight days of good weather now.
Illegal.
What?
Something is either terribly wrong or midway through today or tomorrow it's going to start hailing.
There was an earthquake recently, wasn't there? So
Yes, there was the other night. That was unpleasant.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew Little. This never happened under Tory Whānau's stewardship.
I'm shaking my head for anyone who only listens to audio, and we don't release the video, so you wouldn't tell.
Universal condemnation from around the room for that one.
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
silence where no one can see it.
The looks of disgust on people's faces when Philip mentioned the name Andrew Little. And look, it just happened again. You could tell from my voice changing to a disgusted voice. We've got a bunch of stuff to get around. There's some local politics. There's some global politics. There's a connection between the two. But let's kick it off with our guests. Angela, do you want to give us a quick rundown about what's been happening at the Human Rights Review Tribunal? Because I know that you're keenly watching that this week.
Yeah, kia ora. I will do my best. I upfront, the legal arguments in closing got confusing enough that at least the turf lawyer admitted a couple of times that she didn't really understand the piece of law they were talking about. So I'm not a King's Counsel, and somehow she is. So I might garble it slightly, is what I'm saying here. But yeah, no, so very, very long story short, in 2021, I believe, a group of rabidly anti-trans little old ladies, which is really who the membership of this group is. This group called Lava. And by rabidly anti-trans, I've been chased down the street by some of these people. Like, I just really want to clear it up because they are little old ladies. And you may not think that they are the sort of people who could hassle anyone. But as you will discover when you're walking down the street from your workplace to a bakery, being surrounded by tiny little white-haired ladies screaming that you're a rapist at you, it is actually quite confronting. But anyway, so this small group of transphobes called Lava was, I believe at the time, on a couple of different campaigns trying to stop the Birth, Deaths and Marriages in Relationships Registration Amendment Bill at the time, which allowed for trans people to update their legal sex to be congruent with the agenda. And also, I think around about the same time, they were also campaigning somewhat against the Conversion Therapy Practices Bill, on the grounds that they think it should be legal to do conversion therapy to trans people, but not to gay people. So the bill, as it was written, was it's illegal to do both. And they were like, no, we want it to be illegal to do it on us, but when we do it to other people, we think that's very good. So I guess that's kind of the background. Anyway, so this group, Lava, as sort of part of this, applied for a stall at a fair that was being run by Wellington Pride as part of the broader Wellington Pride Festival. As I understand it, they asked somebody at Pride, went, yeah, maybe. Then somebody in the community emailed the Pride board and was like, these guys are fucking psychos. And so Pride were like, actually, on second thought, we would rather not have a sort of deranged hate group entering this thing and trying to start shit with people, which is what they do pretty universally wherever they go. So that was the inciting incident, which was 4 years ago. And subsequent to that is Lava have sued Wellington Pride at the Human Rights Review Tribunal, which is sort of the peak court that we have in Aotearoa for determining human rights matters. And their claims have adapted a little bit through the course of the hearings. So again, I might not be perfectly one-to-one, but they initially claimed that they were unlawfully discriminated against by Pride for, amongst other things, being lesbians and da-da-da-da, although those eventually got dropped. Fundamentally, what they are suing for is more or less a declaration from the court that being a rabid transphobe, and I do mean rabid, like the sort of person who is like, trans women are men who rape women's bodies through the active appropriation of female sex and like really out there stuff. They are seeking a declaration that that is a special political belief that is worthy of legal protection under New Zealand law, which is sort of like a special measure, right? So some political beliefs are protected political beliefs, and basically if you discriminate against somebody because they have a protected political belief, that can be a breach of their human rights.
Far out.
Whereas Pride was arguing that basically this is an insane thing to try and say should be a protected right. That's sort of the equivalent to saying that, I don't know, the membership of Hobson's Pledge have a protected political opinion, and that they should be allowed, to set up a stall at Waitangi. Or it's very much, like neo-Nazis have a protected right to go and hang out outside the synagogue kind of energy. It's kind of what they're asking for. And so, yes, so that's kind of the court case in the long and short, and it has been an absolute ordeal. It's been, I think, about 4 weeks of hearings in total, broken up across a number of months. And like, just for the listeners' reference, for people who aren't sort of court watchers, you normally, like, most murder trials are 2 to 4 weeks. So this is a huge amount of the court's time and resources that have been expended to fundamentally what is a case of a guy who was trying to start a fight at a nightclub, suing the bouncer for discrimination after the bouncer told him to fuck off. It's about as simply as I can condense this case to. So that's kind of the background of it, and I feel like I've been talking for a very long time, so I'm just going to start trailing off now.
Yeah, I was called up as one of Pride's expert witnesses in the case, so gave evidence. Yeah. The case became quite wide-ranging because of some of the arguments that Lava were pushing. So a lot of Pride's evidence ended up touching on things like whether or not trans people are discriminated against, and whether or not trans people have poorer mental health outcomes, and the role of disinformation and gender-affirming care, like super wide-ranging. So yeah, I gave a brief of evidence that touched on my professional expertise, what we know about trans people's health and well-being, and the impacts that this current political disinformation campaign is having on our communities, the very real threats that we are having to face now, and then was called into court to give that evidence and then be cross-examined. And honestly, my brain has wiped so much of it from memory because it was such a horrible experience. But I was cross-examined by Alava's KC, Nicolette Levy, for something like 3 or 4 hours, like a really drawn out process.
Yeah,
in
4
which
plus.
4 plus. Thanks, Angela. I'd honestly forgotten.
I would describe it as a long of evidence, if I could.
Yeah, good point. Where she had just brought up so many random anti-trans talking points, so unrelated to my evidence. She brought up bathrooms. I mentioned, the number of cis women now that are now dealing with harassment in bathrooms because of people transvestigating them. To which she responded, "Isn't that because trans women are now using public bathrooms, whereas previously cis women could feel safe doing so?" Everything came back to lay the blame on us and our community.
Fuck.
Shocking. I went into this expecting a highly formal, organized affair, and in reality was sitting up on the stand. Out of that 4+ hours, probably collectively half an hour of it was waiting for Miss Levy to find the right document or give the right document to the court, or faff around trying to find a question she wanted to answer. It was unbelievably disorganized.
And that actually, if I might jump back in again, it's probably a good point to sort of talk about the like the deeper background to this case, I suppose, because the fact scenario is, yeah, Lava are suing Pride. But this case is not, as some reporting would have you believe, like a small, scrappy organization with no resources going up against, big gay incorporated. But
Wait,
rather,
is it Big Gay Incorporated?
Lava itself, well, Lava itself is not incorporated. It is not, in fact, an incorporated society. So Lava is suing via two individual people. But they are tapped into New Zealand's sort of what I'm starting to call the Taxpayers Union cinematic universe, which is, these group of sort of dubious right-wing kind of front organizations that seem to have just so much money of, really mysterious provenance sloshing around. So Lava, I think, instructed not Simpson Grierson, instructed Franks Ogilvy, so the firm owned by a noted friend of the show, Stephen Franks, which again is very much part of the sort of taxpayers union sort of broader right-wing influence network. And they in turn got on Nicolette Levy, who somehow is in fact King's Counsel, and who seems to be pretty passionate about the arguments at play herself. Although one of the reasons I think, and something that's quite interesting, sort of zooming back a bit from the case itself, one of the reasons, Jen, that you were left so long just sitting there twiddling your thumbs. Well, I don't know if you noticed this, but I picked this up while I was watching Closings this week. Is Nicolette standing there wordlessly and doing the chop? And is because, so despite having, the sort of broader Wellington forces of evil arrayed around them in their defense, is that I think it's really obvious how much this case is being used by the right as a culture war thing. And I think what made that really obvious is, so Pride was really fortunate in having, I think, at least 3 lawyers from Simpson Grierson, which, big, scary, big law firm in New Zealand. And then I think also their barrister acting pro bono. And so they basically had 4 lawyers on the go at any given time, which is a silly amount of lawyers for most cases.
Whereas the country. Why are there that many lawyers in the country?
Well, it was quite funny though, because in contrast, Lava's counsel, like you normally expect when you have a barrister, right, that you have like a team of solicitors behind them to actually do the organization, to build the case. And if the barrister is kind of like a race car driver or something, right? The rest of the team builds the car, the barrister drives it. But she had no support the entire time, which was insane to me because, as I understand it, as well as Franks Ogilvy were charging money for this service. So you did have, and like this is not, I don't want to go to hand it to Nicolette Levy because she doesn't seem like a very nice person, but it was, I think, always a fairly pitched battle when fundamentally you've got, I mean, the case says what, like 500, 600 an hour's billables up against probably about $2,000 an hour's billables on the other side. Like the amount of resources committed is just very different. And that definitely showed through in the argument. But I thought it was interesting that I think the rights litigation strategy at the moment is to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks rather than picking winners and actually resourcing cases so that they can be won, but rather they're just sort of funding everything. They're not actually committing too much resource behind any one thing. And if they win, great. And if they don't, well, that's too bad. Anyway, sorry.
No, it's really good background. I think I previously described it as like administrative DDoSing. Like they're just like, we're just going to chuck some stuff in there. We're going to gum up the works. Like eventually the other side's going to run out of money and we're not, because as Angela said, like we've got these mysterious like wells of money. And even if it is a grift with, Stephen Franks is like an enormous evil ideologue, but he's still like, nah, pay me. Right? Like he's grifting on it, even if he is a believer. But yeah, they don't seem to run out, and they are stretching their resource to just try and hit as many kind of different places at once. And as you say, like if they can find like a little edge or a little thing, they can publicize that. They can get their allies in the media to amplify it. And talk about it as a win and like, blah, blah, blah. Look, the movement is bigger than you think, not just 3 horrible people in a cave somewhere. Like that seems to be also a lot of what this is about, is trying to make themselves appear like the silent majority, and a lot of their PR and wording and what they say directly talks about that. But we just know it's not popular. We just know this is not popular. They know it as well, and so they have to try and take every single opportunity they get to release that thing. So what has happened? Like, what is the result of these hearings? Because and why wasn't it just like struck out immediately? Why was this even fucking heard? It seems absurd that someone didn't say like, okay, these people are clearly just fucking around. Like, what a waste of time and resources.
Yeah, so what's happened is that closing arguments have happened in long story short. So basically, if there's like a large court case, you have your opening arguments, this is what we're gonna argue, got your evidence in chief, which, here's everybody saying the facts that we're going to rely on. And then your closing arguments where you tie together the bits of the law that you say applies here with the facts that the court's heard. That's the last step before judgment happens. But because of it being a 4-week hearing, there being just reams and reams and reams of evidence to consider, things like that, the judgment is reserved. So basically, it's coming at some point. We have no idea when. The tribunal did say that they would try get it out as quickly as possible, but as quickly as possible for a court, it's sort of different to sort of human timescales. But yeah, so at the moment, everybody's kind of sitting tight. Basically, all of the arguments have been made. I don't want to tempt fate by saying how I think it went, but I certainly think that there were a couple of things in Pride's favor, and I really hope that the tribunal sees it that way as well. But to answer your question, Kyle, how did this happen? Because this is, if nothing else, a monumental waste of taxpayer money. I was trying to figure out roughly how much it would cost per hour for that court to run, and I gave up after I sort of done matchbook maths to about 3-4 grand. So it was a colossal waste of money. The reason that it's allowed to happen is basically under the Human Rights Act, if you feel that somebody's breached human rights, you can complain to the Human Rights Commission. They will offer to do mediation. But if you say no to mediation, which I think is what happened in this case, you have a right to apply to the Human Rights Review Tribunal, unfortunately. So that is just a right that anybody has in law once they've gone through the Human Rights Commission. Although, yes, you do have to. In some cases, the government will pay for you to do the litigation. In this case, they didn't, because they didn't think that there was a viable case here. But one thing that I guess Western courts are is kind of terrible for is that they absolutely will let you spend good money after bad. Like the court doesn't. I mean, the court is wasting its own resources, but fundamentally, if you've got a right to apply, no matter how weak your case is, then that's kind of the play. And then in opposing it as well, I think, one of the reasons that it went on for so long is because, the litigation strategy of Lava was to just everything in the Human Rights Act was breached, and also we want damages, so we want a special payment for our hurt feelings and a whole bunch of those claims were dropped in closing. So it was something that was interesting was that they ran on, I think, 4 or 5 different claims throughout the entire 4 weeks. And that was a lot of the reason why it was 4 weeks, is because you had to bring in actual smart people like Jen to come and give evidence about these very specific points. And then at the very, 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 very end, they're like, oh, by the way, we're not pursuing 3 of those 4 claims. We're just doing the one now. So they really did sort of dick everyone around.
That just sounds like an abusive process to harass people.
That's exactly my my impression of what Lava's intent, at least by the time hearings were kicking off and witnesses were giving evidence, is that from the approach that the AKC Nicolette Levy has taken, and from the evidence that I reviewed, because I reviewed Lava's evidence that related to my statement of evidence, and they really brought out the big guns for this. They brought out a computer programmer whose special interest is children on puberty blockers, and they brought in a really dubious, I think, pediatrician from the United States who video linked in and reportedly, from what I heard, basically gave evidence advocating a position that would be illegal in Aotearoa under our conversion practices law, because he just has a fundamental misunderstanding of what the law in this country is. Like, I fully expect at this point that Lava don't expect to win and will take it to appeal. But I think you're right. It's like a administrative DDoS. It's taken a huge amount of resources from Pōneke's queer community in terms of community fundraising. It's really like taken a toll on the people who are there to give evidence for Pride, and specifically the trans people. Like, we were the ones who got the brunt of Nicolette's fury is the wrong word, because it was like a wet bus ticket, but
Can I just say
horrible
contempt, actually,
contempt.
because
Yeah.
Nicolette, so their lawyer was told by the court not to misgender people, because you're not supposed to misgender people in court. And then after she was told, she kept doing it, and so directions were made, which is like, it's not quite an order. It's like halfway between somebody just saying something and somebody ordering you to do something. But she kept breaking those constantly. And honestly, I was kind of surprised that she managed to get through the whole thing without being pulled up for contempt of court for repeatedly defying everything that they said. Anyway, sorry for jumping in, but I just wanted to point out that she acted contemptuously.
There was one point, a couple of hours into my cross-examination, where Pride's lawyer raised the fact that they had two time-critical witnesses that afternoon who could only appear that day. And Nicolette's response to that was, I don't have many questions for those witnesses and would rather spend my time with Miss Shields. So really laying a lot of focus on the trans witnesses. I think her strategy at that point was just really hoping one of us would break and like say something we didn't mean to. So I will tempt fate. I like, judging from how the members of the tribunal reacted to her behavior, and Angela's seen more of the case in person than I have, but from my experience on the stand and the questions the tribunal members asked me afterwards, I certainly got the impression that they were not impressed with Lava's like argument or Nicolette Levy's behavior, and would be really shocked if they find in their favor. But again, I fully expect, like, now that the publication order has lifted and we're already starting to see this in the media, like, this is when the real campaign for them starts. I don't think it was necessarily ever about the courtroom itself. I think it was about the public online media aspect, and throughout the case they kept pushing that line of like what they were going to share online, and ended up quoting from witness testimony when they weren't supposed to. Like, the reason there ended up being a full like formal non-publication order in place is because Lava continued to kind of push that line of essentially arguing the case online instead of in the courtroom.
Like, and that's how these kind of groups have operated across the West, right? Like, with that interaction between media, social media, what do you say, influencers, and their political and legal actors in these spaces. What was, did you have a point to add just there at the end, Andrew?
Kind of just on that as well, is completely tautoko what Jen was saying in terms of, I think they wanted this trial to be a media event, and then they tried to make it a media event, and because they are like members of Lava are kind of toxic, they couldn't do that in such a way that didn't make everybody very angry and get these orders made against them. But now, as happens often in the West, it's becoming a free speech thing. The Free Speech Union, in its infinite wisdom, is getting involved in, I'm sure that they couldn't possibly express an opinion on the actual case itself, but they're just really concerned about the free speech rights of these, innocent little old ladies who, are being censored by, the court. And
They don't even believe in protected speech.
Yeah. And I think they really fucked themselves in terms of trying to make a media spectacle out of it, because their first tactic was just to tweet everything that was happening, make tweets and blog posts. And then when that didn't work, they tried to bring in their own journalists. So there was this one Kiwi journalist, who essentially was refused to, sit in the media section and take notes. And that's when the Free Speech Union started to kick in. And then they tried to bring in Helen Joyce, who the Free Speech Union has brought into the country. Helen Joyce is the CEO, director, whatever her position is, of Sex Matters in the UK, and is like on the record very explicitly saying every trans person is a massive problem. We need to reduce the number of trans people. Like, this
Actually genocidal.
is actually genocidal. So they tried to bring her in to cover the case because she's quote unquote a respected journalist. And obviously, because at that point the tribunal had seen exactly what Lava were doing, they said, no, of course not. Whereas you've got, like, not necessarily on Pride sides, but one of the spin-offs, like local journalism, local justice reporter came in and was able to report on some of the details of the case because they're not an unbelievable cooker. Like they weren't there to argue the case in the media. They were there to cover it.
Yeah, and so just like the reason that that was allowed to happen is because there wasn't actually a complete ban, right? Like there were non-publication orders made. However, those non-publication orders didn't affect accredited media. So basically, if you're a journalist who was subject to, I think it's either the Media Council or the BSA, I can't remember which, I think it's both, either or maybe. But if you are a journalist who basically has a professional complaint and discipline mechanism, so that if you abuse the, ability that the court gives you to report on its proceedings, that there is some recourse mechanism for the court if you go completely off piece. So there were, in fact, actual journalists, well, as far as they exist in New Zealand, who were allowed to report. And as you're saying, Jen, we had Lyric by Willie Smith from the spin-off. There was also some guy from Law News, which is a publication of the Law Association, and I haven't been able to figure out how to break their paywall, so I haven't actually read what he's written. But also on the last 2 days of arguments was Catherine Hutton, who is a reporter for the Open Justice Project at the Herald. And that was kind of interesting because we did get legit journalists involved, and they weren't much better than the Substack bloggers, I think, sometimes. And actually, that's unfair to Lyric. Like, I do think that her work's been pretty good on this. But particularly, it was remarkable seeing the Herald's coverage of this in the past few days, because I don't think they were there for basically any of the evidence, but the journalist was there for both days of closing, had a bit, was given, I think, access to written submissions at one point or another. And the article that was produced at the end of it was, even for the Herald standard, pretty shocking. I haven't tracked all of this, but I think they've had complaints because I think changes have been made initially. There were a number of glaring factual inaccuracies about the actual reporting of the case itself. I think they said that, going back to the fact scenario of this sphere thingamajig that Lava had applied for, that Lava had fully paid up for it. I don't think they had. There was also a very important detail about basically Lava doing this knowing that this would turn into a stunt, which I was sort of talking about up top. So they were kind of acting in bad faith the entire time and very intentionally applied for this thing, knowing that it would cause this big drama that they could then exploit. And that somehow got elided in the Herald's coverage. I guess that
Somehow,
she
who
just missed
who
that
knows?
bit. Yeah, no. So even then, I think this is the sad thing about the New Zealand media ecosystem, right? Is so firstly, there wasn't a complete, draconian speech ban in the way that you'd get if it was a family court case or something. But yeah, even then, of the three official accredited journalists who covered it, at least one did basically the same job that you'd sort of expect the Substack crowd to do.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, what you're alluding to as well, with the FSU coming in, the Free Speech Union, that what's Taxpayers Union Cinematic Universe, right? And the way it does reach into some of these media outlets as well, and the way that they approach issues, it's really frustrating. And just this week as well, we've had that I think it was an article in the press about the Free Speech Union's conference that they're putting in, where they're bringing, I think that's the one that Helen Joyce and a couple of other pretty nasty anti-trans activists.
All the big names,
Yeah,
Brian
they're
Tweedy.
specifically bringing them in to spread hate, under the kind of umbrella of freedom of speech. But yeah, that's not really what it's about. What's really, are there any final kind of things to look out for? Because I think this is a developing issue in media and politics. We're going to see what happens coming into the end of the year and in 2026 as we head towards an election. And I think it's good to, I guess, be inoculated against that and to have an idea about what to expect. But are there any other final points before we move on to the really now protracted segue I was about to do?
I guess the only final points that I'd have is just sort of reiterating what you were saying earlier, Jen, which is that in a lot of ways, the actual case starts now. Now that the media is interested and that, just your everyday person is allowed to talk about the case online. This is the point at which we're going to see heaps and heaps of articles in the style of the absolute piece of shit hit job that Catherine Hutton did. And I am currently, reaching out to my cis liberal family members and things like that, and just being like, they were acting in bad faith the entire time. Read lyrics coverage of it. Just don't trust basically NZME's coverage of this as far as you can spit. But yeah, just be very skeptical, I think, of forthcoming coverage. Keep your ears sort of open for mentions of the various worthies, be they Jonathan Ayling or like all of the sort of free speech wankers in the country, and just be live to that, because we are about to see, I suspect, a attempt at a pretty hard media influence campaign play out.
And they don't even need to really attempt it, given the number of TERFs or otherwise anti-trans journalists, such as they are, and attempt to hide behind like this kind of like, oh, I'm just reporting what was said. Did you have anything to add, Jen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, equally, when the decision is made, and it could be fast, and unusually for the tribunal, it had 4 members of the tribunal sitting and overviewing the case, so it indicates that there's a bit of priority there. But when a decision is made, and I do feel like it will be in Pride's favor, touch wood, God forbid, when that happens, I think recognizing that for the win that it is as well, like the other side will use it to their advantage no matter what happens. But Helen Joyce is here this week giving interviews talking about like how important these quote unquote test cases are for the anti-trans project. So it failing here shows that we are nowhere near as fucked up as the UK is, and that we're doing well at keeping that shit offshore. So being able to recognize that win when it happens for the win that it is, I think is just genuinely really helpful, not just like strategy wise, but for the morale, because it is like a slog, a long slog. So being able to recognize, the pieces that we're doing well, I think is really critical.
Come and do a victory lap when that comes
Yeah.
across the line. Yeah, I think to that segue, just to really put myself in it with the way I'm running this podcast, it's really interesting that they're pushing this stuff, and they're doing the silent majority, like, oh, it's actually really popular. People are just too scared to say. And then we've just had this big campaign, even in the United States. We're even seeing it in the UK with progressive, let's say, standouts, candidates who are taking a really strong, like, trans rights line. If not, like, just like pro-trans, right? Pro-community. Both Zoran Mamdani in New York and Zach Galansky now in the UK, of all places. The home of a lot of this horrific shit, have just refused to even address the possibility that any of the anti-trans rhetoric is worth even considering. A huge shift from what you call standard Western Labour, or even Greens politics, in a lot of these countries that aren't New Zealand, and getting results with that stuff bundled in to their wider platform. Is that some cause for hope that things are shifting, that these people who have been trying to like run these hate campaigns, they failed again and again and again and again and again, and they've got this funding from like whichever billionaires, so they're just able to keep doing it. But it seems like it's not just that the silent majority are like, no, just let trans people get on with their lives anymore. They're like, actually, fuck you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge cause for hope, right? Like Zoran's campaign, he was at trans rallies, just as a supporter months and months back, and he had that really incredible campaign video centered around Sylvia Rivera, who was really core in that kind of initial Pride movement, Stonewall era. She was a like pro sex workers' rights, really, really explicit. And like Zoran didn't just do a little like trans rights moment. He went with his full heart into it, the same way he did for like every demographic in New York, right? And I think beyond just like our community and the trans community, I think that tactic worked across every community he connected with. And you saw that across his campaign videos, right? That he was getting out to meet like the shift workers and everything. But across the United States and the other elections as well, right? The Virginia Republican governor who was running for re-election, something like 57% of her campaign budget was spent on anti-trans advertising. And in every electorate of the state, even in the areas where the Republican candidate won, the shift was still to the left, to the Democrat side. So like we are seeing this huge investment in anti-trans politics start to fail, and this like real middle of the ground wishy-washy Democrat line of like, oh, maybe we should, maybe trans people shouldn't be able to play sport, and maybe we can give up like trans kids to appease the like electoral project. Even that's starting to fail. And I think the people we've seen this here as well. This is such a bugbear of mine. The people who have been like, we need to be able to negotiate on some of these human rights in order to maybe get them down the line, that tactic is just so in the ground now. We have seen such success.
You would hope.
You would hope, man. You would hope that at least these political parties could learn from, if not their losses, they could learn from their wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that is really promising about Zoran's win is, like, I think as you say, Jen, is at least I think what it means for, I don't know, the like hard right, because it's New York City, right? I don't really think they have a hard right in the same way that other places do. But I think it is showing that libs are moving away from this sort of politics is like a trading game, like you get X but not Y, like everything is a matter of negotiation with sort of existing forces in power, and everything is only ever a modification of the existing things in power because you can't just do everything. And I think that kind of really cynical neoliberal approach, like people I certainly on the left, I think have always been sick of it, but I think in the center as well, are starting to just be like, fucking believe in something, guys. Like, and I just wanted to note as well, Jen, in terms of political victories in the States, I think this was a while ago now that he got re-elected or whatever, but Andy Beshear, who is the Democratic governor of like Kentucky, I want to say, like deep, deep South, sort of had a moment where he had all of these trans smears ran against him because of his stance on trans sports or something. And he sort of came out and did this, sort of like tremulously voice, well, I'm just a humble Christian and I believe God loves all his children type thing. And that's had like a massively popular response as well. And I think that, yeah, the people just want people to believe in shit. And I think what Zoran showed, and what, guys like Andy Bashir showed as well, is that the like specific what's are probably much less important than I think like the sort of horse trading neolib politic people. They're like, oh, well, that specific thing that you're asking for is, too new or too outside or da 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 da. But all it fundamentally shows to people is that their leaders don't actually care for what they want, because everything's negotiable, everything can be traded away, and that their leaders are really cynical. And I think that, yeah, what is really promising about all of this is just the rise of earnest belief again, hopefully, and people wanting to see people nail their colors to the mast a bit and just be like, yeah, I believe in this as well, rather than sort of hitting this level where it's like, oh, what's that? You think we shouldn't feed poor people into a sausage grinder, and then also you like the environment, and then also you don't think we should stone gay people to get, like, that's too many things that you believe in all at once. I think that is starting to fall now, and that is really, really positive, because simultaneous, or like prior to this, right, I think it has been the, I don't know, first term Ardern government, Hillary Clinton, kind of Biden White House to a large degree as well, like form of this game playing liberalism that in a lot of ways I think has been the biggest threat to the trans community, because we are fucking tiny, right, percentage wise. Like, we can and will try to get shit done on our own, but we are pushing rocks uphill. And fundamentally, to make things move, we do need political alliances. And when the largest natural bloc is constantly going, well, we absolutely ate shit because we believe in nothing and we offered nothing to nobody. So the obvious response to that is, rather than changing any of those things, is to find, a much smaller group and tell them to eat shit, right? Like, I think that seeing this change into believing stuff is actually, heading off, I think, genuinely the biggest threat to the trans community, which is a liberal community that will allow us to be used as a pawn in their game.
And I think, like, particularly after the 2024 election in the US, where the kind of the shibboleth that I listened to like right-wing commentators as well, and the kind of the thing they would go back to the most was the like he's with you, she's with they them ad, which was like explicitly anti-trans, like hate ginning up the base ad, right? And the like the kind of standard accepted belief on the center right was that that was their most successful ad and had like ginned up the most people to show up and all these things. And the liberals were going along with that, and they were going, "Oh no, this is going to become a pattern." And I was thinking, shit, like the Democrats have lost human rights for a generation if they go down this path. But it's really heartening. So it's like even more against the tide to see these figures come up and go, actually, no, fuck you. Like I do have the courage of my convictions, and actually have convictions, whereas still maybe in the US, and can actually just stand up and say stuff, right? Like before you even get to the horse trading part of politics, you have to have horses to trade. And like these Democrats for a generation have been going, actually, I'm not going to tell you whether I care about horses or not. So what are we doing here? Are you even politicians? Like it's this bizarre technocratic reimagination of what capital P politics can even be. And like preemptively backing down on solidarity at every level that makes people switch off and go, well, you're sure not with us, however you configure the us, it's this really like broadly anti-solidaristic turn. And I quite like how Zach Polanski in the UK, the new Green Party leader, has kind of made his slogan "Making Hope Normal Again," because it kind of feels like that, right? Like traveling around the country just saying, no, I can actually stand with you as a politician, and just having rooms full of people being like, I've never heard this before, like the most basic political stuff. And there's a reason the Greens in the UK are now polling higher than the Labour Party, according to, most recent polling. It's just doing left populism right, like the stuff we've been talking about on this podcast, Kyle, for 8 years plus. The
Put me in the
opportunities,
ground.
the opportunities there, like really are really, really clear, and there's a gap for like left-wing people with the courage of their convictions to just not back down and stand like alongside people rather than talk to them, like talk at them, It's just been really impressive to watch, eh?
Such a smart move for Polanski, like fascinating and like genuinely hopeful from a trans perspective, because over there, like it's only the Greens, right? Every other political party has said, fuck trans people, we don't care. Like who cares? We'll sacrifice you on the altar of a political win that won't happen because people don't care. So it is only the Greens, which is, I think, really heartening, like outside of that country, looking at an environment that is like so systematically and like consistently drenched in transphobia, to have a politician stand up and say, no, like we will stand for this, is like, to my eyes, feels like a bit of a pathway out for when like shit gets really bad, knowing that someone still will. But also like tactically strong move from Polanski to be like, actually no one else will do it, so here is a massive gap for the Green Party to come in and say, this is this is where we stand, we will support this. And I think, yeah, again, like our community is smaller statistically, but I think a big part of the Greens polling so well is because exactly what you're saying, like the hope, and they have really exemplified that by like standing up for trans people at the same time.
I think
Yeah.
something that kind of commentary class, your poll media class, etc., the polling companies, whatever the fuck they are these days, often miss is that normal people don't like watching anyone get the shit kicked out of them for 5 years straight. That even if they might not be aligned or like even accepting necessarily of a minority group, your average person who isn't like already an extremist or a radical sees that happening and goes like, actually, fuck, this is not good. This like makes me feel bad that this is happening. I'm having an empathy response to this. And they may not have like seen some of the real horrible hate stuff happening. Because a lot of it is online, and a lot of people are more and more frequently offline. They're not in the Facebook comments seeing like these campaigns happening. They are seeing it kind of like stepped around on the political stage, I think, particularly in New Zealand. And it just took longer for them to grasp that. But even, a couple of years ago when that UK turf came over, there's that huge turnout in Albert Park in Tamaki Makaurau of just like everyone to tell her to fuck off. When opportunities are offered to stand in solidarity, you see just this huge range of like everyday people who are like, yeah, actually, I will. And I think in some ways, because of the incompetence of, because of the nastiness of, and because like the anti-human traits of some of these people on the far right pushing genocidal rhetoric against the trans community, people have just like had enough. Like it doesn't even as we said, the horse trading is over now. Like we're not even thinking about that. We're not thinking about like, oh, my job's like, or whatever the fucking liberals were trying to say they were trading out. They're like, no, like we just can't do this. Like we don't want to be a part of this. And they just have been waiting for people with decision-making power who seem to have political power to actually take a fucking stance on it. Because that's been the thing that's been a real struggle, is that the decision-making class across the West are the most radicalized extremist group per capita. And it's not even close. And I include the media in that as well, like the people who are making the editorial decisions. And it's not even just on trans issues, right? Like it's on fucking everything. They've become increasingly just evil. And I think for those of us who are like deep in the soup, in the miasma of the stuff and watching it all the time, that was really easy to see. Like, Philip, you're saying we've been talking about this for 8 years. It was probably part of the reason we started the podcast. But for people who aren't, they're just starting to just go like, oh, actually, I'm putting things together here. I've got enough data points. And also good on them for not being like eating this stuff every day. Honestly, it's not good for a human being.
So what I'm hearing you say, Kyle, is that Chris Hipkins' only path to victory, really, is to announce that he is ploughing the New Zealand Super Fund into free trans sex reassignment surgeries for everybody who asks for it, including asylum seekers, one presumes. And
better return on investment than Nvidia.
Absolutely, and so
that is what I'm saying. That is what I'm saying.
That's what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, no, I just wanted to clear that up. So we should look forward, I suppose, to Labour running a leader in the next year's election who won't word for word have the same talking points on trans people as Christopher Luxon, an evangelical American Christian, did.
It'd be a nice start, right? Yeah, I think even seriously, the lessons you could learn if you were on the New Zealand, even centre left, let's say, even if you're in the Labour Party, that we're going to hear a lot, and are already hearing a lot about, because everyone in the Anglosphere is New York pilled and refuses to learn a second language and learn the lessons of Scheinbaum or anyone in Europe or Africa or any other of the fucking literally thousands of more exciting elections there have been in the last few years, right? But let's say that you refuse to read foreign press and therefore all you read is the kind of the fumes of excitement from the Mamdani campaign. That's the lessons we're going to hear from the Labour Party. There are going to be the most cringe rip-off of his campaign videos for the next 5 years. We're back to post-Obama where everyone was doing hope and change for years. We're back to post every American election where New Zealand goes, I can do that, And one thing Christopher Hipkins isn't is Zoran Mamdani. I think it's quite a clear place to start. But we're going to get a lot of walking and talking videos, quick cuts because that's what the Zoom is like. The great.
I was going to say he's going to have to grow a beard. I don't know if he can.
Honestly, I'd take that as a positive at this point. But there are I do think there are things they could learn in terms of actual messaging, and the first one is don't be afraid to have enemies, right? That's the good bit of populism that in New Zealand people refuse to learn. And I include the Greens in that, like wholeheartedly. We're not comfortable enough having enemies in this country politically. And we do. Like, I want a leader of a Labour Party or a Green Party to like look down the barrel of the camera and say, Nick Mowbray, we're coming for your fourth house and we're going to use it to put homeless people in. Like, that's the conversation you need to be having because people hate those people
They
and they
hate
know
them.
they know we need houses for homeless people. Like, this is how you do populism right, right? Talk to the bank execs. Like, look at the profits the big banks are making and they start naming them. Be like, we know who's making all these millions of dollars and taking it offshore to Australia instead of like we're having conversations about homeless people in Queen Street. Why do you think there are homeless people in Queen Street? We could 10x the money going towards homeless shelters and support centers and all these things, right? These are all imminently solvable problems, imminently solvable problems that all could be done in a term if we just take stuff from people who have too much and give it to people who have nothing. So like I think that's point one, is just like do actual populism and include in that the media. Like say to the media, you are lying to your readers because your purpose is to sell houses, not to inform them. Like that's a cat among the pigeons that I think people could really get behind. People can see the front page of the Herald. They don't
People
think,
hate their media at the moment as
right?
well.
So jump on that. And then number two, clear like kitchen table promises. Obviously, like that's what everyone on the left has been doing. That's been winning. Like say something's free. Like that. The Labour Party, to their credit, have finally started doing that in the smallest possible way with the card thing. But that's what you need to be doing. Like promise something, right? And then the third thing is like just lead your campaigns with solidarity, not with evidence, because like that's what we've been talking about. Is like if people feel like you're with them, it doesn't matter so much what the like third citation for your fucking proof of your concept working is, right? Like I appreciate the Greens in New Zealand in particular are always very like detail oriented and feel that they need to have evidence to fall back on whenever someone attacks them. But you don't need that if people feel like you're with them
Also,
already.
it doesn't work in
Yeah.
terms of the people who are like attacking you for that. You can give them all the evidence they want, and then they'll just say like, "What was it?" Christopher Luxon was saying about the boot camps, right? Like, "Oh, we've got to do something though."
Yeah.
What? What? And the media just
So,
follows suit.
so what I'm hearing you say is that the only path to electoral victory for the Greens is that they need to amend their constitution to specify that only one co-leader can have autism at any given time.
Well, Angela, I think we need to start with small, incremental, manageable steps, where there might be people that could possibly fulfill those requirements. But yes, that would be a big change.
Yeah,
But
it's frustrating though, right? Like because these things have been clear for a little while, and with the wider electoral left here has been responding to these negative reinforcements from an apparatus that is never going to agree with them, is never going to help them. And there's been very little in the way of accepting that antagonism, I guess I would say. And like, you don't even have to attack the media, right? Like, as you're saying, Philip, like, you can actually just be antagonistic towards like billionaires. That's a pretty good start. And because it's not just that people hate these like new upstarts like the Mowbrays, right? It's that the political right are intentionally tying themselves to these people, and the political right here, especially your David Seymours, etc., and Christopher Luxon, obviously, are I think the most generationally unpopular politicians we've had here in 50 years. Like David Seymour in particular, like anything he touches, like is smeared by him. Just being associated with it. Like he went and tried to do that measles thing at Auckland Grammar. And everyone's like, what the fuck are you doing, mate? Get away from us, right? Like he cannot win. He cannot win without cheating the system. And media has been a large part of that. They're smearing themselves by boosterizing him. It's absurd to watch them put themselves in the ground with audience trust, with their stock prices. They don't care because their owners are saying like, "Oh no, we're going in the right direction" or whatever. Like, "Oh, we have to just republish the stuff because that's what reporting is."
Well, also, and sorry to butt in here, but like, I think it really bears repeating at the moment with the state of New Zealand media that NZME has just effectively had a hostile takeover performed on it by a Canadian oil billionaire. They don't
Far right
need,
conspiracy theorist as well. On top,
yeah, no, absolute fucking freak and nut job, Jim Grenon. But like they don't need to make money at the moment, and I suspect that for as long as he has a controlling stake in the company, they won't have to, so long as they meet whatever other deliverables he creates for them. And likewise, stuff has like
Yeah, pretty
one
fair to me that
owner.
have just lost one of their CEO from their executive suite, isn't it?
Yeah, no, but like, and also stuff have one owner that we know of, right? Which is Sinead Boucher, who's already said that she's not going to disclose who her investors are. She bought the company for $1, so it's not exactly like she's saddled with debts and has to produce fantastic returns at the moment.
And then RNZ is
I
basically a black box in terms of how they're making editorial decisions. Like in the face of like multiple OIAs, it's
mm,
the media environment here is fucked.
So, to that point, Kyle, like why are they putting themselves in the ground? It's because they have a captive market and because they don't actually have commercial pressures in the same way that
Yeah.
other businesses do, because they seem to be sponsored, whether it's like stuff with just, every fucking advertising thing that's brought to you by the big banks, or their travel coverage, which is funded exclusively by airlines, or their motoring coverage, which is funded exclusively by the car industry, right? Or whether it is, yeah, just with the NZME and billionaires just coming in and giving cash injections so long as they follow a particular political line. I think this is part of the problem with Aotearoa is that because, sort of mergers and consolidation has made it so that we have what, like three, maybe four, if we're generous, media companies in the country. Um, and because, two, arguably more of those have been completely stitched up through their ownership structures, that we are being abused in large way by effectively a cartel that does not have to provide a quality product.
Yeah. And we've been saying for a little while, like, there's always been the potential for like the media environment here to be worse than one that Murdoch exists in, right? And we're kind of there. You can't, and really amusingly, that is no longer a justification or a get out of jail free card that people in the media throw at me anymore. Like, at least we're not Murdoch or like, etc. Like, yeah, no, you can't say that anymore. Let's swing back around just like I guess for final links to Aotearoa. Philip, do you think there is like you've given some points around like what you think the electoral left should be doing here, and what it should be learning from some of those campaigns and political direction overseas in the UK and the US. What kind of potential do you think there is to replicate that, and how much do you think those particular campaigns have been enabled by having a an individual who is able to embody them, I guess, and Mamdani and Polanski?
Yeah, well, that's the big question that everyone on the left, I think, is trying to figure out electorally. Like Zach Polanski ran to win the Green Party on what he explicitly called an eco-populist platform, and that's involved some kind of reorienting of the Green Party that not everyone there is happy about, but has come out with like a party that's so much more successful that seems to have kind of buried that conversation a bit. And Mamdani came out of the New York DSA, which is, whatever you think of them, as a pretty effective electoral organization now. So like neither of them one off in as much as they were kind of people taking advantage of a moment that was there. And we have the opportunities here as well. And I think it's important to mention the new Chief of Staff for the Greens, Kevin Hague, which I'm a big fan. We've had him on this podcast before to talk strategy. Incredibly sharp guy. Just quickly like going through his CV because I think it says something interesting about like where people are in New Zealand politics at the moment. When Kevin was young, he was in the Young Nats, studied Scandinavian studies, and then saw that social democracy worked, went and did research, and eventually became director of the AIDS Foundation, managed West Coast District Health Board, a bunch of other health boards, deep experience and connections with the health sector, especially public health groups around New Zealand, campaigns, ran issue campaigns, became an MP for the Greens, or got beaten up in the apartheid tour, part of the Halt All Racist Tours movement, West Coast MP for the Greens during Pike River tragedy, dealt with the fallout of all of that, made a lot of kind of allies across the House during his time as an MP. Behind the scenes was instrumental in marriage equality, passing, left, became CEO of Forest and Bird for 5 years or so. And then when And then Labour gave him kind of a bunch of different board positions, like chair of Public Health Advisory Committee, which are pretty significant. So, like, really deep, broad-ranging experience around issues, mostly health stuff and some conservation stuff, human rights stuff, queer liberation kind of stuff. But, like, broadly, the thing that's tied all his positions together, I think, has been like a really good tactical mindset. Like, in terms of short, medium-term tactics, he is, I would say, like one of the best people in the country in terms of saying, like, we are here, we need to get there. How do we do that fast? And how do we get the right people on board and disregard the people who don't matter? Like, he's a brutally efficient operator in that way. So, like, if that's how the Greens are thinking for their next year campaign, like, I can't think of a better sign that they're taking it seriously. And he's the kind of person who can win people over. He was a Green Party campaigner and MP on the west coast of the South Island, for years. Like, he knows how to talk to people. And the fact that he won't have to be a salesperson as chief of staff, but is more of an operator, I think is only a good thing. And hopefully they can take some of that skill with strategy and tactics and kind of disperse it around the country. So it'll be really interesting to see, just kind of beginning in next year when he's bedded in, what kind of changes they make to their strategies and tactics. Because, Lord knows we've been pretty critical of how short-termist some of their decision-making seems to have been. But in terms of running up to a coalition next year, which they obviously want to have with Labour, and then really like serious negotiating position, that's the person I think you want in your corner if you're the Green Party. So great choice. Like, I don't know if it'll make much difference in terms of party positioning or policy stuff necessarily. He's not as left-wing as me, I'm happy to say. But in terms
How does he feel about data?
About what, sorry?
Data.
How does
Data?
Yeah,
probably a fan. All these bloody
shit.
fans
Oh.
of data. I know.
God damn it.
But, he knows how to run campaigns and be tactical about stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if they reorient much. Yeah, I think the main criticism I'd have of the Greens campaign before it even starts is that it will be very data-y, right? They'll still be the smart party, which isn't a good place to be.
So that's more endorsement of what I understood previously as the Greens' only path to victory.
To come
Cool.
full circle, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Look, that's what we like to do. We like to do callbacks. We're really a comedy podcast at heart. You can tell from some of our policy positions. I think that just about wraps us. Any closing remarks from anyone before we?
I should have mentioned it earlier, and I'm not sure if you mentioned it already, but a nice little silver lining of the Human Rights Review Tribunal case is that one of 200 is now officially in the New Zealand court record. Our podcast recording of in the days after the case review was quoted back at me, and I was asked whether I stood by my statements referring to the case review as a piece of trash, and I very happily in the courtroom under oath said, yeah, absolutely.
Hell yeah. we love that. Fantastic.
It's so good.
And what a way to enter the court records as a podcast.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. And thanks to everyone on the podcast this morning. Been really great to have you here. Like I said, let's get you back for a victory lap when that Human Rights Review Tribunal.
HRRT.
Yeah. Hopefully comes back in Pride's favor. Like, share, subscribe, everyone. Let people know that there's stuff out there. And we'll catch you next week or mid next week. We'll see how we go. See you later.
If artifices are then I'm living a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's upon now. It's paved with good intentions, and I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say when they criticism cost me ought to stay. 'Cause I live amongst the people every day in this vindictive, forgetful fucking rain.